Hello and welcome to episode 68 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's eternal search to uncover the multitude of reasons that people get hooked by and on this crazy game. My name's Rod Morri and I'm pleased you've been able to join for this particular episode, which will give us a peek into the world of working with world-class professionals as a coach. But perhaps even more importantly, it will also give us all a lesson in humility. Denis McDade is one of Australia's top golf coaches, and he's worked with some of our very best professionals for the past 20 years. But you'd never know it to talk to him because Denis is the very definition of humble. For McDade, the appeal is not about the high-profile names or their achievements, though he does, of course, enjoy and rejoice in those. But for him, it's about helping people be their best while at the same time doing something worthwhile for the game. Whether he's working with Marc Leishman ahead of one of the game's majors or an anonymous double-digit handicap player on the range at Yarra Bend, the commitment, effort and interest is the same. He's been a tireless worker in the area of junior development, and aside from all that, he's one of the game's nicest people, which is, of course, one prerequisite to being on this show. Without further ado, let's hear from Denis McDade. So Denis McDade, the first thing I normally do is thank people for taking the time. I'm going to thank you for the treats on the table. I should have started interviewing you years ago. There's biscuits, there's cakes, there's all sorts of stuff. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time. It is a commitment, the thing about golf.
No problem at all. And of course, that's my lovely wife, Glenda, who's done that. I wouldn't have thought of that in a million years. As a matter of fact, I had the Nescafe coffee and boiled the billy. That was about it. So I'm pretty sure Glenda might have made you a sandwich to take with you
my goodness,
later on. So.
My goodness me. Well, this is fairly sort of special treatment. Let's make our jumping off point where it normally is. It's the clues in the title for the podcast, The Thing About Golf. What's the thing about golf for Denis McDade?
Well, the thing about golf for me is I would go back to when I first started playing. So before I played golf, I was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer at Surrey Park in Box Hill. And
that's here in Melbourne?
In Melbourne, yep. And we had an outdoor pool. So the start of the season and the end of the season, it was freezing. So we didn't swim in winter because there was an outdoor pool. And I'd be about 11. We started playing golf, and we started at Wattle Park and public course, like probably a lot of golfers. And then Dad said we started getting pretty keen on it. Dad took it up at the same time. He was born in Glasgow but never played golf.
So just to back up, so you had to do something in winter.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick golf? If nobody played golf already, how did the golf? Do you remember? The reason I ask is I feel this is important. The origin stories of people and the pathways into the game. You do a lot of junior stuff, and we'll talk about how people. It's pretty important for the game's health and future, is it not, to sort of uncover the ways people get into the game and find what ways work. So, out of the ether, somebody said, "Let's try golf," or
it was pretty much like that. Yeah. So I played. Dad, as I said, Dad was from Glasgow, so he really wasn't into AFL or rugby. He was a soccer man. He actually played soccer even when he first came to Australia. So I played a bit of soccer at school, a bit of footy, that sort of thing. But Dad was really looking for a pastime on the weekend, and anything Dad did, I just did. So we started off down at Wattle Park, and we both really seemed to like it. I sort of, even though I was hopeless, I really enjoyed the challenge.
Straight away, were you one of those?
Straight away, I've just gone, yep, this is me. And maybe in the back of my head I was going, if I get good enough at this, I have to get in that bloody swimming pool, which was pretty, to be honest, it was a pretty lonely place to be, going up and down a swimming pool, when you're that age. So anyhow, we progressed and we joined Warrandyte Golf Club, which is actually no longer there. And the guy, I think he was a farmer, Farmer Abbott, he basically decided he wanted his land back and he closed the gates on us. So Dad and I joined Box Hill Golf Club, which was just a couple of kilometres from where we lived. And the thing about golf for me was on school holidays, Dad had dropped me off. Dad was a construction foreman. Dad had dropped me off there at like 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning, said, I'll pick you up on the way home. And I'd be there all day with other juniors.
Just go round
and round, playing golf, having fun. And the thing about Box Hill Golf Club and a lot of golf clubs in the area, and I think this is why, in Australia, I think that's why Australia has punched above its weight so much, was as a 13-year-old junior, I had full playing rights. For all intents and purposes, I was a full member. I was allowed to play in competitions, or get a handicap, play in competitions. I could win the club championship if I was good enough, for example. But the main thing was, for me, I'd gone from swimming up and down a pool by myself to playing golf with all the other juniors there and laughing and not having an adult standing over me. And one of the great things that Dad did was he got me to the stage where I could play unsupervised. And to be honest, we probably had moments where we got a bit out of control and maybe raised an eyebrow too, but there was always someone who'd just pull you aside and just have a chat and just go, hey, if you sort of want to be in this environment, there are, you're expected to...
Some rules and regulations.
And I think that's a great thing about golf clubs. It doesn't matter whether it's, Box Hill or anywhere else. There's just so many great mentors there. And through the years, I've been unbelievably fortunate with the people that I've come across in golf. But that was the thing about golf for me. It was just this freedom and the whole social aspect to it. And I started to get better and I enjoyed it and got frustrated like everyone else. But that was it. Just had an environment where it was just, I couldn't believe that they would allow us to do what they allowed us to do, which was great.
I reckon most golfers would recognise all the ingredients that you've mentioned there. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, it's been a lifetime in golf for you now since then. Do we still do that? Do we still see that? Are there still school holiday days where a certain number of kids get dropped off at 8 and picked up at 5?
I think I can only talk about my own experience. And my own experience is that golf clubs are still very open and inclusive. I think from a financial point of view, I think they're probably more cognizant of the fact that they need the next generation of golfers coming through. But from my point of view, obviously I'm involved out at Yarra Bend, and we do everything we can to make it open and available to golfers of all levels of ability. But I do see it at the private clubs as well. So just talking through my own experience at public facilities and at private facilities, I don't think we have an issue with numbers coming through the gate. We have a retention problem. And if you want to start breaking down retention, you can start talking about what you spoke about more with, is this welcoming enough? Are we catering to these people who don't have the skills, the highly developed skills that golfers who have played the game for 10, 20, 30 years or longer? And one of the things I've spoken to, at Yarra Bend, we have a number of coaches. We have what we call the Gateway to the Golf Course program. And when we sat down and revised it, I said, okay, cast your mind back. When you first thought about playing golf, what image did you have in your head of what you'd be doing? And I'd guarantee it would be, you'd have some sort of image of yourself walking down the fairway with your friends, playing golf to some standard, and then sitting around at the end of the day and deconstructing around or talking about your husbands or your wives or your football. There's that whole social interaction. So everyone who samples the game, if you like, will have a different vision in their head of where they want to get to. And as a golf community, a community of coaches and clubs and facilities, I think we need to be aware of all the different people that will walk through your gate and be ready for them.
Pre-pandemic, we certainly saw, Sandy Jamison will tell you, public golf numbers going down. The pandemic sort of boosted that. But the things you're talking about are the things we need to grab onto to make sure that lasts, because as we start to come out of the pandemic, the danger is golf goes back to where it was pre-pandemic. Yarra Bend is a public course. Were you seeing that? So
at Yarra Bend, I think you've been to Yarra Bend. So when there's a group of 11 unit holders, mum and dad investors and coaches and a couple of touring pros and that sort of thing. So when we took it over, it was just an 18-hole golf course that needed some sort of restoration, which we've kind of done over the last decade. But we built a driving range, which we've had to extend twice already, and we built 36 holes of mini golf. So the idea was that from the point of view of being able to, the community being able to access golf, grandparents could take their grandkids to the mini golf. If you wanted to just practice your game, the range was there. If you wanted to play the course was there. And we've spent a lot of money there over the years. And then things like our mini golf, we made sure that 9 holes of it were wheelchair accessible and that sort of thing. However, getting back to your question, prior to the pandemic, we had double-digit growth year on year on year.
Okay.
And it was almost like the more we upgraded our facility, the more we improved it, the busier it got, and probably through word of mouth. So we weren't experiencing ourselves the downturn in golf.
That a lot
we actually had some growth as we improved our facilities, but I can assure you that post-COVID, it's gone nuts. And then that brings us back to the whole thing of, okay, well, we've got people sampling the game, so it's not like growing the game. We've got them now. How do we retain them?
Keep them?
It's retention that I think we need to look at.
What about expanding beyond just golf as an activity, particularly for public golf courses, Dennis? The easiest and the laziest criticism to make of golf, and we hear this from those who are anti-golf. There are people who are just anti-golf and the notion of it. You know? It's a large amount of land reserved for the benefit of the few. How do we help to change that perception? What can golf do to be better at sharing that public space? And this is something that's in your interest, I imagine, being part owner of a golf facility.
It is interesting. Out at Yarra Bend, as you know, we're in the middle of a national park, and there are bike tracks and ovals and netball courts and football ovals. But having said that, it's with all the spare land that is around us at Yarra Bend, people want to jog through the golf course. And it's kind of like, and they get annoyed if a ball goes near them and that sort of thing. So I think to some extent, I call them the troublesome 3%. Like if you survey someone, there'll always be someone who's got a contrary view, right? And I don't think it would matter what you tried to do to convince those people, they just wouldn't have a bar of it. But I do look at some of the places where that, let's say, green space is being contested and there's not enough green space around it. It's like things have been shut down and closed down and redeveloped to the point where it's almost the only piece of green space that's left. I really haven't got a solution to that problem.
Do you see public golf? I've always felt public golf is the most important way into golf for most people. It was your path into the game. Do you agree with that? Is the very game itself dependent on a healthy public golf complex, for want of a better term?
Well, there's no doubt. So if I look at the golfers who came through the VIS program when I was involved with it, the golfers that came through either started their golf at a public golf course or at a private course that had open doors where you could come and pay for play. Yeah. Semi-private, yeah.
Box Hill would be an example of that one. I think Robert Allenby was at Box Hill, was it?
Yeah, Robert Allenby. I think Stuart Appleby went there. And they both went to Yarra Yarra, but I forged the path there. I went from Box Hill to Yarra Yarra. Yeah, so I forged the path
where it's true.
Credit where it's due, Rob. Yeah.
And they've done all right in their careers, but let's not forget where it all started.
So it's just, that I think getting back to what I said before, one of the reasons Australian golf has always punched above its weight is because of accessibility. It's always been possible for juniors and teens and adults to access golf if they want to, and bringing it back to what we spoke about before with shared access and that sort of things. From our point of view at Yarra Bend, like, say, closing the course on a Sunday to let people walk their dogs through it and that sort of thing makes it really tough for us as a business. We do 50% of our business pretty much on Saturday, Sunday. So that's a tough gig for us. Maybe some of the council-owned courses, if they're still running it, they might sort of take that hit and open it up. But I haven't got the answer for that. For the people that are demanding, access to these courses, we've got my Labrador lying here. I'd love to go for 9 holes and have him on the lead because I know he'd love to walk around a golf course and have a sniff and that sort of thing.
But that's just, we don't have more of that in Australia, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
It can work.
Especially we're a nation that pick up after our dogs and
for the most part, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, generally speaking, the dog park is the prime example, isn't it? The problem is never the dogs. Yeah. It's the people. That's the problem with the dog park. No, Lockie, you're right, mate. You stay asleep there. He's a beautiful, magnificent specimen that you've got as well. Let's move away from that. Of course, one of the reasons we're talking to you, Dennis, is that your own profile is not particular high. You're very well known within golf, but not so much outside. And yet you've had an influence on some of Australian golf's most impressive careers. Marc Leishman is a student of yours. Run me through some of the other people you've worked with and still work with over time. And I know that you're not super comfortable with the notion of blowing your own trumpet, but it's undeniable, is it not, that you have worked with some of our most successful players over time?
I've been one Australian coach who's worked with some successful players. So you mentioned Marc Leishman before, who I still work with. We've had a relationship for over 20 years. I can say very sincerely that he is the same guy that I met all those years ago. Like, all his success, everything he's achieved in the world of golf hasn't changed in one iota. And, it has to be said that, he's very much a product of his mother and father.
Yeah, very much.
Paul and Polita are just magnificent people. Yeah, so Marcus Fraser I worked with for a long time.
Another similar sort of personality to Leishman, I would suggest.
Yep, terrific fella, great player.
Underrated player in so many ways, I think.
Played Europe for 16 years.
Yeah. Led the Olympics after the first round. There was a damn good chance of having a medal there.
Yep, and still a hell of a player. Paul Sheehan coached Paul through his career.
Successful Japanese tour career.
What a player. Japan Open winner.
Yeah.
Which
for those who might not be familiar, that would be one of the most brutally difficult test of golf, the Japan Open. Generally an overpass score. Makes the US Open of the 80s look like a stroll in the park quite often.
I have to say, Paul got me over to a Japan Open one year, I think more about, I'm not quite sure that I believed the setup he was talking about.
And then you see it.
And I went there, and there were these ladies with rakes on the left-hand side of the first. And I said, Shio, what are these ladies doing? He says, they're just raking the rough so that it grows in such a way that the ball goes to the bottom. He said, so it's just like, okay, I'm getting an idea of this. And I after 3 holes, I was laughing. He goes, what are you laughing at? I said, I can't believe the setup. There was a par 5 that was just like a funnel. It kept getting narrower and narrower and narrower.
You went.
Just to the point where I think it was about, at sort of layup distance, it was about 12 yards wide. I was just going, geez, you want to have your straight shoes on this week, Shane. But he was a really
underrated player. We have had quite a few go to Japan. We had Brendan Jones on the show just a couple of weeks ago. A 15-time winner in Japan.
Extraordinary player.
Could walk around most golf courses in Australia and people wouldn't know who he was.
Yeah.
Which he's very happy about that, by the way. That suits him down to the ground.
Yeah.
But
what a player, Brendan. Yeah. So Matt Griffin, still working with Matt, playing up in Japan. Very different type of player. Like their golf DNA, these guys are all completely different. And I coach each one of them quite differently. And then who else have I coached? Bryden McPherson. So I coached Bryden through the early and mid stages of his career. Of course, won the British Amateur as an amateur.
There's an active mind. We've had him on the podcast here too. But that's maybe an overactive mind in some ways. Highly, highly intelligent fella.
Extraordinarily intelligent.
No off switch.
Great
upstairs.
thinker, yeah. I've had some conversations with him where I've just gone, I'm clearly, and I think his dad might have been there once too. I'm just going, I'm the least intelligent guy in this room right now, let me tell you. So, but lovely fella.
You've got your notebook. Come through.
I've got my notebook because I've and then a couple of the guys, I'm working at the moment with Todd Sinnott, who's sort of coming back from injury.
Extraordinary physical ability, Todd Sinnott. Just
amazing,
staggering golfer to watch, to listen to the sound of that contact is amazing.
And with with Todd, he's a hell of a golfer. Loves the game, like just obsessed with the game, like we all are. But with the injury that he had prior, sort of coming along. One of the things we've had to do with him is totally change the way what practice means to him. Just from a pure volume.
You can't hit 1,000 balls a day, Todd. You need to back.
It's just managing. Yeah. Just managing that. And then some other players I've worked with. Gareth Patterson from New Zealand.
Left-hander.
Left-hander. Lovely guy, Gareth. Always just one of nature's gentlemen, Gareth. Like, he hasn't got a bad bone in his body. And then Ash Hall, I coached, pretty much through his career.
Lost a playoff just a couple of years ago to Jordan Spieth and Cameron Smith, if I'm not mistaken, at the Australian Open.
Yes, he
was
did.
In that three-way playoff. Well, lost is a strong way to put that. In the playoff that was won by, I think, Spieth, did he not hold putt across the green there at Royal Sydney?
Yeah, it is interesting. Like I look at, you look at players that have made it, that players that you've done your best to help them get as good as they can. And you look at the players that have made it and the ones that perhaps didn't quite get there, and you always reflect on that.
Of course,
as a coach, you have to. This is part of the process of getting better.
Hard to find a better player than Ash Hall. If you went out and watched him play golf, you'd figure, well, of course he's going to be playing on the PGA Tour. He's as good as golf can be played, and that's true.
Well, Marc Leishman has said of Ash that when they played pennant, that the only guy he was ever really concerned playing against in match play was Ash Hall. Yeah. And I actually said that to Ash, and Ash was a bit surprised by that. And I said, well, might be a bit better than you think you are. But
so what's your theory? What's your theory about that? Why does Marc Leishman make it and Ash Hall? Not that Ash Hall hasn't made it. That would be a harsh assessment. It's not easy to get a start on the World's Tour. There's a lot of guys who, if they could get a start, could make a career. But getting a start is extremely difficult.
One of the things I've always said is I think to win a golf tournament or to get your break, you need a little bit of luck as well. You can have skill, you can have a great team around you and that sort of thing. And I kind of look at Ash and you just go, was there a sliding doors moment? And there was when he was playing for web.com, or he used to call it the wet.com, by the way, Ash. He said, it was almost, you'd go there on Monday and Tuesday and just gone, geez, the course super's done a great job getting this ready. You could see the way the course super wanted the course to play. And then by the time Thursday morning came, it was like dartboards again. Like, geez, we had 6 inches of rain, but anyway. But he lost 2 playoffs pretty much back-to-back. I can't remember the year off the top of my head. And it was kind of like he eventually finished 27th on the 25. And it was like, if he wins one of those playoffs, secures his PGA Tour card, maybe we're having a similar conversation about Ash to what we have about Marc. You know, there's definitely those, you know, seizing your moment and or having that, you know, something go your way and just go. As we know in golf tournaments, you can play your best golf and not win.
And somebody plays better. Camp Percy lost a playoff to a hole in one. Yeah. Jonathan Burr. What do you do about that? In the dark. They didn't even know it had gone in, I don't think, until somebody at the green said it's in. So
it can be something as simple as that sliding doors moment. But the other thing with say I look at someone like Marc or someone like Marcus Fraser, you know, when they were getting close to turning pro, we sat down, we said, right, here's our plan A. Now, if plan A doesn't work out, here's our plan B. If plan C doesn't work out, we've got plan D. And hopefully we don't get to plan E. And for Leish, if I talk about him for a moment, you know, the plan A was because he was coming off a very strong amateur career and was clearly ready and clearly competitive. You know, I always say the best way to get yourself on tour is to have your game pretty much at tour standard when you go through Q School. So he was clearly at that level and went over to the US and just didn't play as well as he could. So he didn't get through there. Came back to Australia, got his Aussie card, missed his Asian card, played a couple of events, I'm pretty sure they were Von Nider Tour events back then and won a couple of those and just shot some unbelievable scores, you know, some very low 60s. As a matter of fact, I think he might have shot 60 at
Wollaware.
He
won at Wollaware. I remember that, and it was extraordinary golf.
Yeah, and then he went up to Korea, got his Korean Tour card, and he had a third. And then
did not know that.
Yep,
he played the Korean Tour.
Yep. So he got his card. He finished third in the first event, and there's a story that goes with that, and I'll leave that for Marc to tell you one day. I'm sure he'll be happy to tell you the story around what happened to his ball on a particular hole when he was the chance to win the tournament, and. Very much as Leish does, he said, right, I'll show you guys. He went out and won the next week and then went to the US and started Monday qualifying for the Nationwide Tour. He had a very strong awareness of where he wanted to play, how he was going to get there, and he started Monday qualifying and, he got into some events and, you know, at that stage we had the couple of Nationwide events in Australia, so he sort of had that little bit of status and then, cut a long story short, he won the Midlands tournament in his second year over there on the PGA Tour and really hasn't looked back. So if I look at someone like Marc, he had a very strong purpose to where he wanted to get to and why he wanted to be there, and I think that makes a difference as well.
In a game that is where confidence is so important, that road that you've just outlined for Marc can eat away at confidence and destroy players, and it has done to some very good players. Is there something about the personality that you're born with that makes you not impervious but able to better handle it? We've already spoken about what a laid-back character Leishman is. How important is that and how much of that can you build in?
So around, let's call it a set of mental and, I don't know, human/personal skills that you need to be successful at the highest level. I think there are certain number of those that are innate, and then there are some that are acquired. So I think one of Marc's greatest strengths, and it's something that's been in common with a lot of the players that I've coached, is they learnt to play golf by playing golf.
Mm-hmm.
That's
interesting. Yeah.
They learnt to play golf by playing golf, and then any work that I do. So Marc, for example, is very much what I call a visual external player. So he'll see the shot, and the image of that almost creates the swing, the setup and the swing, and everything else he does. So my job, to some extent, was to, over a period of time, give him a better set of mechanics so he could be in that mode and just hit good shots more often and the bad shots not be quite as bad. Yeah. So, but one of Marc's greatest strengths, or I'd call it character traits probably, is he lives to compete at the highest level and beat the best players he can play against, at the highest level possible. So if you put him, coming down the stretch and he's in a major against, the best players in the world, that's where he wants to be.
He's shown
and that's not all players want to do that.
He's a big moment player, isn't he? Cam Smith is very much the same.
They live for that. And, I consider myself to be, reasonably competitive, but that sort of thing there, I'm not 100% sure how I'd be in that situation. I never had the opportunity, but I do know I used to, in the limited playing I did, I used to shake when I was holding a putter, and it meant something. So, but those guys live for that. So I think, looking at Marc, for example, he had a lot of the traits and a lot of the qualities that you needed. He had, and then he got onto PGA Tour in 2009, and the start of end of 2011 still hadn't won, which I was kind of looking at going, we just haven't quite kept moving forward. And he basically got to the stage where it was like, I know I'm pretty strong in this area, but I think there might be something missing. So he started working with Neil Smith, and then early the next year he won for the first time at the Travellers.
61, I think, in the last round. Sat around for about
62,
3 hours.
I think. 62.
Sat around for 3 hours,
so,
waited for Charlie Hoffman to finish.
So he came from a long way back. And some
didn't Marcus Fraser win the same weekend in Europe, maybe?
So Marcus Fraser lost in a playoff to Danny Willett in Germany, I'm going to say.
Yeah,
so that was almost the weekend of my life.
He didn't sleep that weekend virtually at all, obviously.
It was a bit of a mess. Sort of middle of Monday morning, but that was So I think around the equipment you need, obviously we can talk golf clubs and clothing and footwear and ball and that sort of thing.
They're a given, aren't they, Dennis? You can dial those in.
Yeah.
You can go to a good club fitter and he can build you a set of clubs that you don't need to change anything. It'll produce what you want. Yeah. The things that aren't programmable in that way are what happens upstairs, aren't they? You say, he's thinking to himself, what am I doing wrong? I'm not winning. The truth is, like majors, there's a lot more good players than there are tournaments. So it doesn't matter who's not winning each week. If you're on the PGA Tour, and in fact, if you're on the Web.com Tour or the Corn Ferry Tour, that secondary tour, Ash Hall is a hell of a player. That's a hell of an achievement. You're in the top couple of hundred players on the planet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yet we view it as not getting the job done. He hadn't won. Been 3 years, he hasn't won yet. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
And the putters will start questioning, well, how good is he? And
we missed that putt on the 17th.
He's been unsuccessful because he hasn't won on this tour or that tour yet. And it's like, wow, you need to get out and watch some golf and just see just how good these guys are and how difficult it is. You literally need the planets to align for you.
Yeah. And that little bit of luck, as you say.
Yeah.
I suppose we judge, don't we, by the extraordinary. Tiger Woods I would consider extraordinary. Rory McIlroy's extraordinary. Jordan Spieth is extraordinary. Justin Thomas is extraordinary. But they kind of set the benchmark, don't they? There's a level of golf which I think, Cam Smith is in there, and I think Marc Leishman drifts in and out of that tier of golf. He's not always up in that rarefied air, but he can hold his own there when he gets there. There's something very special about them, isn't there? I wonder whether we underplay the Dustin Johnsons and the Brooks Koepkas, and what they do is almost unthinkable for normal humans, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at at the moment, there's a lot of punters talking about Rory and they're measuring.
Can't play. Terrible.
Can't play.
Can't hit a wedge. Dennis, didn't you know that?
Yeah.
It's a shocking wedge.
So, I'm not going to sort of, pass a comment on the way what his wedge game's like at the moment, but, I think, Rory, and, Dustin, they're measuring. Can't play. Terrible. Can't hit a wedge. So, I'm not going to sort of, pass a comment on the way what his wedge game's like at the moment, but, I think, when you start reeling off the names that you've reeled off there, like trying to get on top, trying to get into contention and deal with any lopsidedness in the draw and get yourself in there with a chance on the back nine on a Sunday.
There's 3.5 days leading up to the
not easy
to the point.
Yeah. And you look at the Players' Championship this year, and it's not often that you get a side of the draw that's that lopsided. And of course, the telecast will say, well, here are significant players that have missed the cut. And it's kind of like...
Notables.
Notables. Sorry, there's the word, notables. Yeah, notables that have missed the cut. But it is extraordinarily difficult to come out on top in any one of those weeks. You just need so many things to go right. And you can do everything to the best of your ability and someone plays better than you. But it is interesting just how often in a major you look at a scoreboard after 2 rounds or 3 rounds and just go, yep, it's a major. I don't think this has been controversial. I always feel like a major is perhaps, given what we just spoke about, is perhaps an easier event to win than a regular tour event.
Koepka says so.
Yeah, because if you look at a major, let's say the field's 156. How many guys out of that 156 really think they can take on the course and beat those guys coming down the stretch?
Bob Rotella says 10.
Yeah.
He told me once 10, maybe 15.
Yeah.
You throw out the other 140, there's 10 to 15 who genuinely think and can back it up.
Yeah.
There may be the odd one who thinks they can win, who shouldn't be thinking that, but there's 10 or 15 in reality who can. If you're one of them, that puts you in pretty rarefied company, doesn't it?
And then you will get the extraordinary new talent come through and the planets align and they seize their moment and away they go. And now they're part of the discussion of those 10 to 15 players, right?
That's Jordan Spieth. He was that player, I think, of this sort of most recent generation of he was clearly a special talent.
Yeah.
But exactly, he holes a bunker shot, which he's done 100 times in his life, but he holes a bunker shot that you're not going to try. You're not going to hole it in 10 tries, wins a tournament, and away he goes. And
of course, I think it's difficult for us as people who haven't done it, like to have, a wedge or a 9-iron or an 8-iron into the last hole, and all you've got to do is hit the green and 2-putt and you win the tournament. It's just like...
How hard could it be?
How hard can it be? That's right.
Tom Watson had a 9-iron into the last green at Turnberry.
I was there that year.
Matt Goggin played with him. I've had Matt tell the story a couple of times, and he said, as soon as Watson hit, he said, that's too good.
Yeah.
Sound, that's too good. That's a... Yeah, and just that. Yeah. What are you talking here? 3-4 feet? Yeah. If it stops rolling 3 feet earlier, it doesn't get over the... Who knows what can happen? You talk about sliding doors moments.
And talk about, judge of talent. I was over there that year and Tim Wood had a practice round with Tom Watson. And
that's extraordinary, isn't it? Tim Wood gets to have a practice round with Tom Watson. What a game we played.
So it was amazing. So it was interesting, and I'll try to get this story as close as I can, and Tim would be able to correct me again if I get it wrong. But basically, Tim said, "Hey, there's a time slot with Norman and Watson. Should I put my name down?" I've just gone, "Yes."
Is that a rhetorical question?
I think more for me. I wanted to ask a few questions, So anyhow, Tim went and introduced himself to Tom, and then somewhere along the line, we got word that Norman had been delayed somewhere. He was coming in by a helicopter or something, at some stage. So that delayed the tee time. So eventually, and I'm just trying to think of who we played with.
Not the other
Daniel Gaunt. Daniel Gaunt put his name down as well. I'm sure it was Daniel Gaunt. So we were standing on the tee thinking, well, it's not going to happen. And Watson walks out and he's with 3 other players, and I cannot for the life of me remember the 3 other players. So he'd obviously teed up another game thinking Tim had hit off. And he looked at Tim and he turned around to the guys and he said, "Sorry, I've already got a game organised." Wow. And walked onto the tee and played 18 holes with Tim and Daniel. And I think we were walking down the second, and he said to Tim, "Oh, where's the wind coming from this week?" And Tim's kind of going, "I haven't looked." He said, "You're playing a British Open, you might want to check." There was something like that. But the thing that really stood out, so the reason I bring this story up, was I was watching Watson, and he'd had the hip replacement surgery, and he looked like he was moving really well. But with the putter in his hand, I was looking at his putting stroke going, because I remember him, in his youth, of course, having been someone who watched so much golf on TV, and I'm kind of thinking, geez, that putting stroke looks a bit shaky, and of course he putted the spots of it. So I was really hoping he was going to win that week. But I remember thinking, yeah, you're not as clever as you think you are. Like he was just holding it from all postcodes that week. So, but what a player, what a week.
Let's talk about coaching, Bruce. So how did that come to you? Because for a lot of people, as like most people, you wanted to be a player. Then the realisation that perhaps you're not going to be a player, because that's an extraordinarily hard road to hoe, even if you're extraordinarily good. Your options are to leave the game or to go into coaching. Some would never consider coaching. They would rather pull out their own teeth without anaesthetic than consider coaching people. Why coaching for you? What was the appeal there?
So for me, by the time I started my traineeship, although I told mum and dad it was, well, this is me backing up if I don't make it as a player, I just wanted to be involved in golf. That some way, shape or form I wanted to be involved in golf. So
that's true passion, isn't it, Dennis? I can't be a player, I'll be a coach. I can't be a coach, you end up like me, I'll write about the game.
And for me, I was extremely fortunate. So, Bruce Green coached me from, I'm going to say from about 15 years of age through kind of 19, 20. And someone who just loved coaching, although he sort of ran Royal Melbourne, he clearly
Head Pro Royal Melbourne, by the way, for people for a long time. Bruce Green, a legendary figure in Australian golf, Bruce Green.
So I basically said to Bruce, I want to turn pro, and he, I think at that stage, I'd finished year 12. I went to uni for a year, and like a lot of things in life, I suppose, I went to uni and I figured out what I didn't want to do. It helped me figure out what I didn't want to do, and that was.
Just as important.
I did electronics, a course called Electronics and Computer Science, because this is how long ago this is. You had to be able to program computers, but the electronics side of the course was about repairing computers because you didn't throw stuff out in your head.
Dennis. There's nothing in about it. It's a fact. It's a fact.
So I did that for 12 and I said, just gone. There's no chance I'm doing this. So anyhow, Bruce said, He said, there might be a position for you here. And the first thing he did was he teed up a job for me at Dunlop Slazenger and in South Melbourne. And basically, I'm pretty sure for a boy from Box Hill, that was knocking off the rough edges. Like, we might just get you a little bit schooled in sales service and what have you. So, which I'm eternally grateful for, because it was a great sort of 12 months or so of my life, working there, and I'm still working the game. And from the moment I started my traineeship with Bruce, there were still caddies at Royal Melbourne then. I think there still are, but there are a lot of young caddies. And Marcus Johnson and I, a terrific fellow Marcus too, he said, well, you guys should be coaching the caddies. I've just gone, oh, can we do that? He said, yeah, you should do that. And he said, and you should charge them. I was going, really? He said, yep. So Marcus and I, we charged the caddies $2 each a month, I think. And then we'd get them together and basically try to coach them with no skills. But I found at that period of time that I actually quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed being out. I certainly enjoyed the challenge of it. I certainly recognised I had no skill. It was just all bluff, what I'd learned from Bruce, which is typically what you do. And then when I went to Keysborough Golf Club, Bob Spencer was very much the same. I'd sort of built a relationship with the members, and some of them say, hey, do you give lessons and that sort of thing? I said to Bob, hey, do I give lessons? He said, yes, you give lessons, And he said, here's what you charge and blah, blah, blah. And my early experiences of coaching were coming from the base of absolutely no idea what I was doing, but dealing with the members at the club that I got on well with and enjoying that experience. And they kind of knew that I was no good, but I think they enjoyed that one-on-one time as well. And it's something I've always enjoyed with coaching, is that interpersonal relationship. It's different with every player. And it's interesting, when you called me up and wanted to get together, I wrote down a list of like the players that I've coached over time. And I've just gone, yep, I enjoyed coaching every one of them. And there are players over time who I have had the opportunity to coach that I've said no to because I kind of know them. It's just like,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
Personalities
it's just not going to work.
A caddy and a player have to get on. A coach and a player, I assume, have to get on.
Yeah. So basically, I had enjoyed doing that. And then one of the other things, a bit like that uni story of figuring out what I don't like, I'd figured out that I wasn't a salesman. I struggled with the whole irate customer sort of thing. And to some extent, I think there's a difference between servicing a membership and being subservient. Yes. And I think sometimes the members kind of got a little bit lost with that. And being the son of a short-tempered Glaswegian, I've kind of gone, you know what, I'll one day, might not be now, but I'm going to tell someone what I really think of them. And that's just not going to hurt either my employer or it's going to hurt me directly. So I kind of figured out that sorry, that sounds a bit dramatic, but I kind of figured out I didn't want to be in a pro shop, like like doing all of that stuff.
Yeah, there's ways to coach to sell clubs, isn't there? That's one sort of way of teaching golf, isn't it? I mean, you should this one out. I wouldn't have seen you as that. You would coach to make players better, I would think, for them to enjoy their golf more.
And sometimes equipment is part of that deal.
Yes.
You get someone sort of bowl up with a set of golf clubs that's not
wrong for them.
That can impede. But so really that was my experience before I went out and played, was that I could see myself doing some coaching. I actually quite enjoy it. And then when my playing career was, if you call it a career, was done, it was just like, okay, I'm actually going to be a coach. This is what I want to do. And to some extent, again, mentors. Once I finished, and to give Bob Spencer his due at Keysborough Golf Club, when I finished my time, I'd really struggled with my playing early in my traineeship. And Bob Spencer spent a lot of time with me during the traineeship, to the point where I've just gone, I've got to crack at this. So, we talk about coaches who have high profile and coaches who don't. Like Bob gave me some, along with Bruce, gave me some really good instruction. And then at the end of my traineeship, Bob said, hey, what are you going to do? He said, because I'd like you to be my partner, which was an extraordinary offer and gesture, and one that I was very tempted to take at the time. And I said, look, I've got to know. I said, for me to have the sort of drive and willingness to do whatever I do in my life, I've got to find out whether I'm good enough or not. Because I don't want to be in my mid-30s or mid-40s going, I should have had a crack. So I said to him, it's an unbelievable offer, but I'm going to say no. And at that time he said, you know what? He said, if that's where you're headed, he said, you probably need someone who's a little more skilled than me. So I went along to Dale Lynch. So, through the years that I was playing, Dale Lynch was coaching me. And
someone who flies under the radar, Dale Lynch.
Extraordinary.
We'll get him one day. Don't worry about that.
Yes, please. Yeah. And he was an extraordinary coach. And again, another very strong influence on my coaching career. It was just like, hey, here's a guy who really seems to enjoy what he's doing. He's very knowledgeable. I get better. I feel good after I've spent time with him, and my golf game's better. So when I finished, to some extent, finished playing, I said to Dale, I want to go down the coaching path. And my first job, you'll laugh at this, my first job was teaching into a net at a pitch and putt course. With Sean Lynch, who ran Australian Pitch and Putt. So there were two sites. There was one in Waverley and there was one in Dandenong. I don't think the Dandenong one's there. And Sean was very generous and paid me a small retainer each week, and I sort of ran clinics and what have you. But with the talk about, where technology is now, I had a camera that took a full-size VHS with with a TV, and I drew lines, and all it did when I looked at it on video and slowed it down, it just highlighted the point that I didn't know what I was looking at.
This is interesting.
But that was sort of like but even then, even though I was sort of just starting out, it was just like, right, I'm off and running, even though.
In some ways, Dennis, we talk about a golden era of professional tournament golf in Australia. That was a real golden era in the beginning, a pioneering moment for coaching, was it not? The 1980s, the 90s, and the sudden marrying of technology to, we've seen it come full circle. We've had a generation of players with beautiful looking golf swings that cameras can help to produce. We've come to a TrackMan era where we're starting to see again more players with somewhat unorthodox swings, but the numbers work. You've been there from the beginning of that. That's been, often think about when we talk technology in golf, we always think about golf clubs and golf balls, and that's true, that's a part of it, but the coaching technology is off the charts, is it not? What we've learned about everything from the characteristics of the balls and the clubs and how they interact with each other to the human body and how it works, how to build a human body the best way to swing a golf club the most efficient way and get the most out of it. You've been part of something quite remarkable, have you not?
It's been an extraordinary time to be a coach, and as coaches we're always at least trying to get better and step back from what we're doing and what have you. But we've gone from an era where, very few coaches had, a video camera and could really explain what was going on, even when they did have one. And I'd stick my hand up and say, when I first had one, that was me, coming off a base of very little, coaching ability. But so we talk about that there's a balance between the art of playing the game and the science of getting better, if you like. And I think, there's so many technologies around now that, and I've probably got caught up in it, not caught up in it, but challenged by it, is there's so many different pieces of technology. You've got Doppler radar like, TrackMan. And okay, well, you've got all of these different numbers, if you like. Well, what are those numbers? What's the proper definition of those? How do they interact with each other? And what are you going to do about it? And then you've got things like, there's biomechanical testing equipment, K-vest. You've got pressure plates, and it's been a challenging time to be a coach because you need to be across this.
Well, consumers demand it, don't they, Dennis?
Well, they do. There's an expectation. Yeah, there's an expectation.
20 markers come to you and say, well, put me on the TrackMan.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because they see what's going on. So just because you've got information, that's not necessarily knowledge, right? So, but it's a challenging time. And I suppose at one stage I bought my own 3D testing equipment. It was very expensive.
Wow. Well, yes.
And then I figured out that, it's probably better to get a biomechanist who's an expert in analysing the interaction between all the different body parts and being able to have a conversation with them, because they do it all the time. So, for example, any of that testing equipment, if you're going to compare one set of data points with another, it's got to be calibrated the same way. All of those sensors need to be positioned on the body exactly the same way. But then, like if you look at something like force plates, so if we look at force plates as opposed to pressure plates, force plates will give pressure and they'll give twist, they'll give torque. It's like, then you've got to figure out, okay, which of those data points are important and relative to what we're doing right now? And that's not easy when you get 20 or 30 data points spat out at you. So that's where I think it goes back to when I was when I got the job as VIS assistant coach. I sat down with Frank Pike and he said, Dennis, there's only two things you've got to do. He said, when you get up in the morning, think about what you're going to try to achieve with your athletes that day. And he said, surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And I wasn't sure whether he was having a crack at me or not, whether he thought he got the right man, but that I still reflect back on that. So I look at any of the players that I've coached who have got better. I can't claim credit for what they've done to some extent because they bring a certain amount of talent to the table in the first place. And there were people who will argue that, well, they would have found their way there anyway. And you could go, well, they might have, but it would have taken a hell of a lot bloody longer, And then every one of those players has had other people who have had an influence on their development, be it a biomechanist, be it a physical preparation person, be it a doctor, be it a mentor, be it a sports psych. They've all had, it's very much a patchwork quilt of people who have assisted them along their journey. So I've probably got to the stage where I've gone, right, I don't need to be an expert in analysing biomechanical data, but I've got to be able to read it and have a conversation with a biomechanist to some extent on their terms and then them on my golf pro lingo terms. And you just have these discussions with different people.
Cross-pollinations, where you've got physical trainers now working with golf. When you first started, there would have been none of that. There was a golf pro. The golf pro taught you how to play golf.
Yeah.
that's what they did. Now there's all these other people, particularly if you're going to be an elite player.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of other people required. We joke about the modern touring pro travelling with a team of nutritionists, and all of those people have a role to play in the success of that player, don't they?
Yeah, and look, from a coaching point of view and a coaching development point of view, I don't want – this is going to sound terrible. I've got to be careful the way I phrase this. I have people that I deal with and they're not yes men or yes women. They'll just go – they'll challenge what I'm thinking, or they'll challenge why I'm thinking of heading down a certain path. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're going, yeah, but you're missing this. This is actually significant. How does that fit into where you want to head to? So that's been one of the good things to this day as reasonably well developed as what I feel like my coaching skills are. I'm still challenged by the people that I work with, which is a terrific thing, because that eventually ends up providing a better result for the players that you're working with.
Go to the other extreme, Dennis, and there are still those who'll tell you it's all nonsense. You just got to look at the ball. Mm-hmm. What's the ball doing? Is that still legitimate? Where does that fit in?
So I can tell you one of the things that I think, the ball is just it just reacts to how it's being struck, right? So
it's
one
truth,
of the things,
isn't it? It is the truth. The ball flight is the ultimate truth.
So I do spend a lot of time watching my players play, watching their flight, getting them to hit different shots off different lies. One of the things about golf is, if we look at how I learnt to play different shots, back at Box Hill, I had a bag of practice balls, and it took a long time to get a bag that had balls worth hitting and
balls. That's right,
and you'd hit them down, and then you'd put your bag down, chip to it, that sort of thing. And, depending on the season, there were different lies and different grasses to hit off and that sort of thing, as it was like out the golf course. Nowadays, just about everyone practices at a driving range. They don't have to go and pick their balls up. They're hitting, range balls, what have you. So
off a mat.
So
it's flat.
Yeah, that's flat. So it's. I was talking to one of my developing juniors, or one of the young juniors I'm developing on the weekend, and we were talking about how to sort of practice ball shaping. And I said, well, you can do your basics here, because you've got the option of hitting off a mat, or you're very fortunate you can go and hit off a grass tee. And I said, so you can start to introduce some of that. I said there needs to be an aperture through which you're hitting the ball, and eventually we need some depth control as well. I said, but I can guarantee you, here's what's going to happen one day. You're going to be coming down the stretch in a tournament. You're going to have to birdie the last to, make a cut or get through Q school or win a tournament. And the ball's going to be above your feet in the first cut of rough. The flag's going to be cut hard right in behind a front trap. And you're going to have to hit a high fade off a lie where the ball wants to go left. I said, let's make sure when that moment arrives, you're ready for it, or at least as best prepared as you can.
It's not completely foreign to you.
Yeah, and we're probably getting a little bit away from technology and talking a little bit more about the art. But ultimately, we use all of that technology to create, let's call it a great baseline of mechanics that you can then go and expand upon or adjust a little bit to hit all the different shots.
It's the beauty of the game, isn't it, Dennis, that there are, in fact, no two shots the same. Even if you hit a ball, drop another ball right at your feet and hit that, those two shots can never be exact, because the conditions are never quite exactly the same. The lie is slightly. Everything is always slightly different in golf. It's a constant change, isn't it? And so you can't science it out of existence, can you? There's quite a few sort of systems and thought processes about how to break the game down. It's that money ball idea from baseball, and we can bring that to golf. And there's no doubt they've got merit. What do they miss, if anything?
See, I think there's, if just talking technology for a moment, you can definitely see, using technology, you can see the way different players hit different shots. So one of the things that I'm pretty big on, around, if you want to call it collecting data or analysing data, is when a player is moving well, so be that I think they're moving well, or whoever's working with me thinks that, this is really good, let's grab that data, because that becomes, I suppose, to some extent the new benchmark. It's not so much working towards a set of numbers, it's more that's the movement that suits this player's physiology, best. It's giving them best control over their flight. So, that they're hitting more good shots with more control and the quality of their bad shot is improved. Okay, what are those numbers for that player? Because that's what we want. How are they moving? How are they interacting with a force plate if you're using some of that? Because that's what, in my mind, becomes really important. And then, can they hit the variations that they want to hit? And then if you start delving into, some of the Moneyball type stuff you were thinking, Marc Leishman is very much a visual external player, but he has statistics on every part of his game with someone going, right, here's where you're at right now relative to the field. Here's what's improved this year. Here's an area for consideration. Over the last couple of events, this has dropped off. We need to pay some attention here. So different players deal with that information in different ways. But ultimately, with all of that data, let's call it, it can be as complex as you like. It can be as simple as you like. But you need to package that up in such a way that you, first of all, gain the attention of the player, and then you've got a plan of attack of how to move forward with it. So I always, one of the things we did, if I go back to VIS days, and I know Golf Australia do a little bit of it now still to this day, is one of the strengths of the program is we were able to send our players overseas to compete. And to some extent that was, there was, and we sent them over before people thought they were ready to compete at that level. But some of it was about, okay, well, we'll give you a budget, you book your own airfares, you enter for the tournaments, you figure out where you're going to stay, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you want to be a tour player?
Yeah, that's right.
Here's an opportunity.
Nothing to do with golf, but you better be good at this stuff.
Here's your first opportunity to start figuring that out for yourselves. It was very much, there's your budget, you come to us with what you're going to do and move forward there. So there's that sort of thing. But the other reason we did it is we wanted them to be exposed to international level and to some extent come back and go, you know what? We played at Carnoustie in this wind and the guys I was playing at with the locals, they were doing this and I didn't have that shot. How do they do that? And I always think from a coaching point of view, if you get a player come along to you saying, I have a weakness, help me with it, that's a very different coaching environment to me going, you need this.
We need to fix.
It's totally different. And
it's engagement, isn't it, Dennis? That's a difference.
And tying it back in with that data thing again, often we can go, oh, well, here's what we need to modify in order for you to be able to play that shot more consistently or the way you need to do it. So although there's so much information or data that's available to players in this day and age, you still have to just go, right, here's the way I'm going to present this to Rod in such a way that it's going to gain his attention. And that, again, is very different with different players.
Yeah, you could make the case, really, that the information is for the coach to filter and then pass on, can you not? It's not always a great thing for the player to know those things, is it?
So I think, that's right. So coaches and support staff, it's deciphering that information to go, right, here's what's really important out of this, and here's the way we're going to approach this player.
Of course, that whole intangible element of coaching, which is to tell each player in the way that makes sense to them, and the way you explain that to Marc Leishman might be different to the way you explain it to Matt Griffin, might be different to the way you explain it to Bryden McPherson.
It's interesting. I always feel like, not always, I've had several times through my coaching career where a player has gone, I figured this out. And they've just gone, I figured out if A, B, C, D happens. And it's kind of like,
I've been telling you that for 2 years.
And I'll just go, that's wonderful, that's amazing. And it's like, that's what we've been working on. But now you've spat it back to me in a different way. And it's kind of like, I go, well, there's a learning opportunity for me. Maybe I should have expressed it that way. But when a player goes out and they do something that costs them and they're able to step back and make a correction themselves, I think, I think that's a great thing for a player, around self-confidence and self-reliance. So for argument's sake, if you can create a situation, well, one of the things I say after tournaments to players is, okay, let's do a quick analysis. What did you do well? What did you not do so well? What did you learn, and what are you going to do about it? So kind of walking them through that process of, okay, where are you at the moment as a swinger of the golf club and as a player, and what do you need to improve. It's like trying to get them to walk them through that process of coming up with the solution themselves, because I'd much rather take a player through that process than me hopping on a plane going over than just going, right, this is what was wrong. I think it's just better for a player to go, even if you are sort of feeding the information, walking them down that path, for them to walk away going, yeah, I actually nutted this out and figured it out, and I'm back on the march again. I think that's great for a player.
Isn't that the difference between knowing the times tables rote and understanding how multiplication works? You come to the same place, but just learning that 2 + 2 = 4 and having no idea why 2 + 2 = 4 is not as valuable as that moment where you go, oh, that's why 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
It's a much more powerful.
Yeah.
It arms you much better for everything else that comes along with that, doesn't it?
And yeah, exactly right. And it's interesting, looking at plays. You and I could be 150 yards from the range and look down the line and just go, right, well, that's Ernie Els, that's Tiger Woods, that's Jordan Spieth. Like they have their own patterns of movement.
They're fingerprints, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're fingerprints.
And they get to a certain stage where as a coach, you're always trying to balance, can I get them to improve their weaknesses without them losing their strengths? Right, that's pretty basic, right? That's coaching 101. But
it's fair pressure, though.
It is a fair pressure.
Some of the careers you're talking about.
Yep. Well, you're dealing with people's livelihoods.
Very much.
Yeah. So that's why, we talk, if we go back to that data stuff for a moment, what it does is it provides information for you to make a better coaching decision. Because at the end of the day, you're making a highly educated guess of where you need to go, if you like, off the back of the information you have and the experience you have, the trial and error experience you have. But sort of bringing it back to, that conversation, the patterns of movement. So if I use Marc as an example, if his striking starts to go off, it's normally one of 2 or 3 things. So it's several times we've been able to just have a conversation around that, or do a face-to-face conversation around that and get back on track. It doesn't mean you're not trying to move them forward. It's there's your starting point. Let's re-establish that base. Right, what do we need to do now? And the only time, it was interesting, the only time that really didn't work was when COVID hit. So, the start of 2019, Marc won Tory, lost to Chilhatton by a shot at Bay Hill, and then shot 500 in the first round at the Players around a golf course. It's probably not his favourite.
It was on, wasn't it?
And I'm just thinking, right, this is the year. He was just moving so well, and then COVID hit, and he came out the other side of that not so good. And then, to the point later that year in October, I met him at the Zozo where he was, for Marc, he was in crisis. But then again, it was just like, hey, who's that guy out there? That's not the way Marc Leishman plays golf, nor is it the way he practices. And sort of from there was able to set that right pretty quickly. And talking about equipment, he's got a great guy in the bag, Matty Kelly, and that conversation was, Matty was part of that conversation. And, certainly part of Marc's success can be contributed to the guy he's got on his bag and the care that Matt has for how he plays. And
does he ever? I don't think he's ever had another cat. Well, not that I know of. But I can only remember him.
When he started out, he had a lovely guy by the name of Dale Eden on the bag, and then ended up with Matty, who he's known from Warrnambool days, and they're a great team, those two. And
it's often very telling about a player, the caddy-player relationship, and you can read things into that sometimes. I think about the character
and the way they treat each other.
Yeah,
it says a lot.
Yeah.
But it's really always interesting to look at the results a player's getting, what the player's perspective on it is, and what the caddy's perspective on it is. And I find that fascinating, and it's more data or information to sift through, if you like. So,
it's an outside view, isn't it, caddy? And it's interesting.
And talking about stats, it's really interesting. Often I'll look at Marc's stats and I'll just go, hey, how's this part of the game? And he just goes, oh, it's actually really good. Just on this hole I was trying to do this, this and this. That's why it looks like that. So,
It's an extraordinary game, isn't it, Dennis? Where I think Bobby Jones talked about this, that golf is a lifetime of relearning lessons you've already learned, that a player like Marc Leishman can come back to 2 or 3 same things that he's probably been doing since he was 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
All these years later, they come back to haunt you, and that the player themselves can't always necessarily pick that.
Yeah.
That it's that one of those three things. It's an extraordinary game, isn't it, that you can get that far and still be bad.
I have to say he's pretty good, Mark. He doesn't tinker too much. I'll certainly, I always say one of the things I say is that my job is to expose players to a number of different ways of doing something to help them figure out what works best for them. So it's not often that Mark tinkers. He'll normally call me up, or we might be face to face. He might be saying, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And I'll just go, "Yeah, that fits in. You can look at it from that point of view." Or, I don't know whether I like that because of this is what you've always done. But he'll just we just get back to those things that have worked for him, and basically with Mark, because he's if you look at we're talking a lot about Mark, but if you look at where he was brought up and his DNA of the way he developed, so Warrnambool Golf Club, great golf course. I mean, great golf course. Like so many different shots required. It's windy, it can rain, it can be hot, cold, but the golf course itself, there's so many different elevation changes and so many different demands on your shot-making ability. But from a practice facility point of view, like the putting green next to the pro shop's pretty flat, really nice little short game green, like nice bunker and what have you. But essentially, as far as a range goes, you're hitting balls into a paddock. There's no real target and that sort of thing. So I look at the way Mark learned to play, and it was very much, well, I'll hit some balls and work on what I need to do. And he had some great tuition from Craig Bonney down there, early in his career. But it wasn't a particularly inspiring practice facility. And that's not me being critical of the place. It's just a statement of fact. So he'd much prefer to go and play. So the way he'd always improved was by playing golf.
On the course.
So to this day, when we work on mechanics, we'll do it typically away from a golf tournament, not during a tournament week. So if Mark thinks about his golf swing when he's playing, he plays horrible.
Yep.
So he's got to be in that reactive mode. No, he's a player, right? So we'll work away from a golf tournament. We'll work on one simple thing. So I work on as I said, we gather all that information. I just go, right, here's what we need to do with setup. Here's what we need to do with your downswing, for example. Or your movement through the ball for that matter. And he'll hit some shots and he'll just go, yep, I've got that. I can feel that. I can practice that. And he'll just go, right, now I'm just going to hit some shots. And he'll stand there and he'll start recalibrating, if you like, all of the different shots he plays. He goes, yeah, let's go and try it on the golf course. And he'll go out on the golf course and play holes. And he'll just go through that sort of process where he puts it all back together. And he's very much a player who'll just go, right, I've got that. I'm not going to try to fix it today. I'll just keep chipping away at that, over the next few weeks or whatever it is, and just gradually get things back on track. And of course, because he spent if we talk about bandwidth of movement, because he spent, the greater part of his career within a certain bandwidth, he can sense it when he's starting to fall outside of it, but can also sense it when it starts coming back in.
When it's narrowing too much, yeah.
So it's interesting with him, even if he hits a bad shot when he's been working on something, he'll go, yep, that's the way that should have come out. I can feel the way I delivered the club there. That's exactly where that should have gone, which to him is as much being back on track as going, yep, that came out there because it should have come out there. So it's interesting, working with these players. Sometimes it's like, bloody hell, who's teaching who here?
Well, so, that's probably...
Yeah, which is part of the fun of it.
Probably a two-way thing happening there, in all honesty, because and this is my next and probably my final question, because I've just seen how long I've taken for you, and I could talk to you all day. But anyway, so you work with Marc Leishman, that's at one end of the scale. Mm-hmm. There's the other end of the scale, isn't there? Mm. What are the similarities and differences between those two things?
So working with recreational golfers?
Recreational golfers, double-digit players who... And I imagine you would see a lot of people who have come to the game perhaps a bit later in life, become completely obsessed with it. The first thing they say to you is, I wish I'd taken this up years ago. And when you spoke to them years ago and said they should try this, no, it's an old man's game. Well, I hate to say I told you so, but we told you so. What's the difference working with those people compared to Mark?
Apart from the sometimes obvious physical differences in ability, it's interesting. I'd almost put my recreational golfers into two buckets. There are ones that come along and they go, I don't really care that much about lowering my handicap or what I score. I just want to hit a few more shots out of the middle and show my mates who are slinging off me that I can actually hit a golf ball. I just want them once to go, wow, that was actually a really good shot. So there's those sorts of people. And then you get ones come along going, played the game for so long, my handicap's either stagnant or going out. Can you please assess my game and put me on some sort of program that gets my handicap coming back the other way? So from the point of view, so that would be like the two different buckets that I would put them into at this stage. And then from there, the process isn't that different. So, you'll watch them play golf. I think if you can, watch them play some holes because that's always eye-opening.
It's interesting you should say that. I'll get you to expand on that afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then you're going through a similar process as a coach. You're just going, right, you're looking at the ball flight. That's their bad shot. They've spoken to me about. And normally they've got two, right? They'll hit a slice and a pull, for example. And you go through the process of going, right, well, first of all, from a concept or cognitive point of view, they need to understand what causes their bad shot. And it's surprising how often they don't understand what actually causes that shot.
Do you reckon it's surprising, Dennis? I reckon 90% of people who play the game have no concept, and I'd put myself in this, no concept of what it is, the contact between them. The game is a constant surprise. Everything feels the same, and one's a hook and one's a slice. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, it's not often you get a hook and a slice in the same place.
No, but you know what I mean.
But yeah, I suppose, from a cognitive point of view, help them understand why their ball's doing what it's doing, and then set about changing the motor program. So anytime, obviously, your cognitive abilities and your motor skill, motor skills are stored in separate parts of the brain. So it's helping them understand you're actually retraining the brain and neural pathways.
Wouldn't have known that, Dennis. That speaks directly to what I was saying about that point. Coach in the 70s would not have known that the motor skills are stored in a separate part of the brain.
So, and then to some extent around expectation, it's like helping them manage their expectation. Like my expectation, at the end of a lesson is they understand what causes their bad shot. We've worked on some sort of exercise, movement or drill, if you like, people call them drills, that create, the purpose of a drill is to create a model off which to work. Yeah. So they can kind of go, right, I can feel when I do that, I'm doing that. And ideally they get to the stage where they go, oh, I can sense that that's different. And then importantly, by the end of the lesson, they need to understand, ideally they're able to say, right, they've done, they've worked whatever exercise it is enough to go, oh, I felt myself do it that time and I could see the ball come off that way. I should have done this, shouldn't I? And when you get to that stage in a lesson, if you can, I know they're going to come back better because they get it. You've given them an exercise that's helping them move the right way and they can actually self-assess. They're comparing themselves.
They're part of it.
Yeah, they're part of that.
Do we think sometimes of golf coaches like doctors? I'm sick, I go to the doctor fixes me, and that's our transaction.
Yeah.
My golf swing's off, I go to the golf coach, he fixes it, and that's that. It can't be that way, can it? The player has to have an active part in the process.
Like there's all these, there's so much on the internet nowadays. But I don't. So here's part of becoming a better player that needs to be communicated over time. Is you need to have your student working on the one thing as a coach that you decide you need to do, because a good golf coach is working several steps ahead of where they are, right? They're going, right, I'll put this into place, we'll step back on it, see what changes, because often you get reactive changes. Then I think I'm going to have to do this, this and this, and then we'll be where we need to be. But one of the things I think is really important is to help golfers understand what they don't need to work on, because they've been on internet for years and going, well, I need to do this, this and this. It's kind of like, well, that's irrelevant to you, your physiology, your equipment and the way you move. Like work on that, it's not going to do anything. Here's what you need to do. And that's like when you go to the doctor, like if you go to the doctor and you're sick, or unhealthy, the doctor says, hey, listen, Dennis, just lay off this and do this.
Less wine, more apples.
And you might, you might, and not cider, right? And you might start feeling better. So I think that whole thing of knowing what you need to do, don't worry about all this. If I haven't spoken about it, don't work on it. And then the other part of that is around expectation is like how long it takes to become a really good golfer. And I'm talking about, you know, the swinging, acquiring all the different skills that you actually need to get better takes time. Like motor skills are very enduring. You know, you have a neural pathway with myelin built around it. There's already a super highway there for your golf swing. It's not a one lesson thing or a 60-minute lesson thing. You can change concept and perhaps change some movement, but really owning that takes a bit longer. And most golf coaches will know when they look at a player that, well, you know, you're going to have to be, you know, a number of different things that we improve over time. And then, you know, that process, if you like, can I talk about juniors for a moment?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah. So just to finish off on that, it's not that, I don't find it that different working with a recreational or club golfer to a tour pro. It is different because it's not their livelihood. But the way I go about helping them get better is not that different. I'm not the quick fix guy. Like I had an example. I was at MGA many years ago, and I had a guy show up with a bucket of balls in his driver, and he said, "I've got a corporate day tomorrow. Can you help me?" And I kind of looked at him and I said, "Well, I'm on a hiding to nothing here. I'm either going to be, you know, the toast of the town, or I'm just going to be this guy that you know ruined my day." So I said to him, we sort of got it. We were a few minutes in. I said, "Here's what I want you to do." I said, "You got two options. You can go and get a refund, but what I'd really like you to do is just go and have a practice now because you haven't played for 3 months. Just get a bit of exercise, go and have your day tomorrow, and come back and see me next week, and let's do this the right way," which he did do. So, you know, there's all of these different, you know, theories around it, but at the end of the day, I sort of treat them like effectively what you're doing. You're trying to assess a human being you've got standing in front of you, you know, how they learn, what their goals are, and you just go down the path of trying to help them get better. And from that point of view, it's not that different to touring pros.
It's a relationship, isn't it, Dennis? It's a people business.
It is, yeah, and that's why, like I spend a lot of my time teaching club golfers and juniors, and I do that because I genuinely enjoy it. You know, it's very different. Like there's still pressure on you. Like when someone's paying you for an hour of your time, they expect a result at the end of it, right? So it's different to it's different to, you know, standing there watching a player come down the stretch in a tournament and, you know, hoping that everything you've said helps them to sort of get over the finish line. But there's still that pressure and that you're dealing with in the expectation of the client, which is different for all of them. And then when it comes to juniors, I think I've spent the last, at least 15 years working on trying to provide a better quality of program for juniors, you know, and probably through my own two kids when they first started wanting to play.
What do you mean by that, a better quality of program? What was the problem with the quality of program before? What are you trying to improve on? What are the mistakes we used to make with juniors?
So when I look at, like, what is a junior golfer? Like, what is a junior golfer? Well, if I put a photo of a group of 5-year-old juniors, which is very much a demographic nowadays, say 10-year-old juniors and 16-year-old juniors, the average pundit would look at them and just go, well, they're all junior golfers. And then the question becomes, well, would you treat them all the same or treat them differently? Because clearly they have different athletic development and golf skill development requirements. Like they're just totally different.
Mental and emotional development too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think when I talk about providing a better junior program, I think for a long time, and things are changing, certainly changing, but when I first started going down this path years ago, like a 5 or 6-year-old junior would be coached in a very similar way to a 16 or 17-year-old junior. And I can assure you that is not optimal.
Work, of course it's not.
It's not optimal. Like if you put together a program that's not age appropriate, yeah, like it's built for a 16 or 17-year-old golfer, that is a great recipe to drive a 5 or 6-year-old junior who's sampling the game out of the game. You know, it comes back to that retention again. So the programs, you know, through Titleist Performance Institute and, you know, the people that I deal with here in Australia, we just took a different look at it and just said, okay, well, what do these kids need? So we basically created a program that's takes a very significant pays a very significant nod to long-term athlete development. So LTAD is a term that's been around, for a long time, right? And to some extent, it's a retrospective study of how elite players became elite. What did they do? And from that, there were the big draw card, or the big takeaways from that was they lived a multi-sport culture, and they didn't, in late specialisation sports, they didn't specialise until late. Yeah, and I think not only at the time when I started developing my own junior programs, not only were the programs not age appropriate, but they're almost early specialisation programs, which is great if you're a female gymnast. Not so great if you're a golfer who wants to be at the peak of their powers between the age of 25 and 35. So the program that we rolled out with TPI was to some extent the first practical. Actually, I shouldn't say that because there are countries around the world that would argue it. But we basically looked at LTAD and said, right, what's age appropriate? And we went from there. So
tell me about what sorts of things. It's quite surprising the things that you do with young kids as part of a golf program. I was quite staggered the first time you told me about it. It does make sense.
Yeah. So basically, if you look at so kids are more sedentary nowadays than what they were when I was young. And there's so many factors that come into that. There's parents wanting to sort of, keep an eye on kids, make sure they don't hurt themselves, or, there's all sorts of, we're always worried about, the people around that want to do harm to our kids and that sort of thing. They're pulling playgrounds out of schools because they're worried about litigation, that sort of thing. So I could talk about why that is for hours, but our kids are more sedentary. So they come down, so they're sampling the game at a younger age. And they're
5, 6. This is the school age.
Yep. And they're making decisions around whether they want to stay in the game at a younger age as well. So what we do in our programs is we've actually surveyed our kids. It's pretty funny when you survey a kid, right? So we just go, what are your favourite after-school activities and why? And number one, it's fun. It's so much fun to do this. Number two is I get to do it with my friends, or I make new friends doing this. Number three, and this is really important for golf, I feel welcome. I feel like this is a welcoming environment. 4 is it feels good to do. So imagine, a 5-year-old junior being given a driver and 100 balls and say, hit that for the next hour. Yep.
Oh, no, you've got to grip it like this. I know your stance isn't
and
quite
then,
right.
And then you got to be good at it. You got to enjoy doing it, right? You got to get good at it.
Yeah.
And when you look at the reasons we play golf with different people or play golf, it's pretty much for that. So we've taken LTAD and basically what we do is we have taken it upon ourselves to go, right, if kids are sitting on their bums more, someone needs to take responsibility for helping them become athletes, because often we get 3 categories of juniors who come along to our programs. That's A, the parents are golf nut or the grandparents are golf nut. B, the kids are golf nut. Or C, golf's the last resort. Oh, he's not good at football or he's not good at cricket.
Okay.
And we kind of feel like golf's a sport he could play. Now, you and I just know the athletic requirement of golf.
Right.
So our junior program, the ones that we run, we have a childhood athletic development trainer who's on site. And what they do is they take, so if we had an hour, for example, with a group of fundamental phase juniors, which is like one of the early developmental phases, there's a window of opportunity there to neurologically wire speed. So you'll see our kids trying to kick, throw, punch, whatever athletic development exercise you're doing. There's a do this as fast as you can. As far as hitting a golf ball, hit it as far as you can hit it. I don't care where it goes. Let's just take that opportunity to develop speed, because if you miss that window, you've missed it. Okay, that can be affect how fast you can move as an adult, for example. So
that's extraordinary.
So we develop what are called fundamental movement skills, which are just the easy way to describe it is they're the building blocks of athleticism. There's the locomotion skills, hop, skip, run, the ABCs, agility, balance, coordination, speed, object control, kicking, throwing, punching, striking, that sort of thing, and then kinesthetic and spatial awareness, if you like. And they're the sorts of things that if we look back on probably you and I, what we did as kids, I don't know about you, I got home from primary school, I unlocked the front door, I threw the school bag in the front door, and I was gone till dark.
I was a bike rider.
Yeah.
I just rode a bike constantly.
So what we're trying to do is replace some of the athletic development that's not being done by parents or even to some extent schools this day, because golf requires athleticism. And the thing is, if we develop or assist to develop athleticism, you can actually teach them to become better golfers. Like one of the questions I ask when I'm doing seminars on this, because I lecture on junior golf at TPI around the world, is I said, have you ever had that kid, that boy or girl, show up at 7 or 8 years of age, they've never played golf, and you say, hey, hold the club like this and do this, and they do it straight away. And all of a sudden you've got visions of Tiger Woods. Have you ever thought about what that is? Well, that's the expression of the athletic development that they've had. I can guarantee they've either got sporty parents or they've had 3 or 4 or 5 different sporting activities that they've played already.
Cricket, basketball, football, doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. And typically the sports that relate to actually striking something, like, for example, or throwing something, I think one of the great things parents can do for their little kids is little aths. Because you've got sprinting in there, like sprinting's like taking advantage of that speed window, and then the field sports like discus, javelin, hammer, all of those, shot put, all of those, they're just brilliant for golf. There's a great crossover. And then the other end of the scale, you get that kid come along who's 7 or 8 years of age, and and I don't say this from a derogatory point of view, they're like the Australian chess champion. And you just go, well, that they're lacking athletic development. And that just from a coaching point of view, I know which one I'd rather coach, and I know which one I think has more chance of making it, at the higher levels in the game. So, the little athlete that's there, you just go, right, parents, you've done a brilliant job. Keep living that multi-sport culture. We're going to be doing stuff in the program that will challenge even where their athletic level of ability is right now. And then with the other junior who hasn't done anything, it's just like, I always say this in coaching, development is sequential. You can't start studying calculus if you haven't got the basics of mathematics. So we assess them and just go, right, here's where we start. So let's say they're the same age group, those kids, they can train together, but they'll be doing totally different things.
So the athletic kid will have a golf club in his hand to be playing golf shots, and the other kid might be doing somersaults and things unrelated to golf.
So there's the athletic development component to the program. Then there's the golf skill development component of the program. It's a golf program, right? So we're doing
Golf's
that.
got to be the end result.
So it'll be when they're doing their athletic development, there'll be a different focus. They might be using different equipment, and the trainer can take them through that. And then from a golf development point of view, you're working them through a curriculum. So we have a 13-year curriculum that we work through. It's like being at school.
Wow.
You show up at school on day one. Here's what you're starting today.
What's the feedback, Dennis? Are there kids who've been through all 13 years yet?
We've got some coming like in the sort of, I'll call it mid-high school area.
What's been the feedback, and what sort of things have you learned about? Because, of course, not everybody needs or wants to go on to some sort of high level. I mean, if the chess kid ends up just becoming a 15 marker for the rest of his life and loves the game and travels the world and is passionate about it, it's equally as impressive. I mean, we don't want to get too taken away with just the elites. So.
We're going to be talking about this chess kid. So if the chess kid, and I'll be pushing up daisies long before he gets to this stage, but if the chess kid has played golf his whole life and he's in his mid-50s and he plays every weekend, he's playing off 15, I consider the junior program that he came through to be a great success.
It's a huge success.
Because it gets back to retention. And as I said, the junior programs around the world, it's interesting what parents... We haven't even started on parents. We haven't got time. But the expectation... I won't even open that can of worms, but the programs need to be like, if we had a world-class talent come through, the program needs to be versatile enough to cater to that. I kind of consider the junior programs that we run, one of our jobs is, if we look at the elite end of town, is to feed elite players into the pathway, because you're only going to turn out at the upper end of the pyramid. That relies on a certain volume of players coming through, right? Yeah. So I think the junior programs need to be sophisticated enough to be able to do that. But just as importantly, or probably even more importantly, is how many kids can we actually inspire through, our own passion for the game and programs that are age appropriate to stay in the game long enough to go, I'm pretty frigging good at this. I actually really enjoy it. I've made a bunch of new friends, and this is actually what I want to do with my time outside of work. And, perhaps meet someone and introduce them to the game, and then have kids that they introduce to the game. Like, that's the retention that we want. I can see, like, one of the things that I'm really big on with junior golf is I'm actively involved in the junior program at Peninsula Kingswood, for example. And the reason I'm involved in that is I think our juniors deserve the best we can possibly give them. So, I'm involved in that program because I think they deserve it. I'm not sort of trying to pump myself up.
No.
But if I can, like, a little bit of my passion for golf can wash off onto them and they enjoy themselves and they go, I want to keep doing this, even if some of them, do decide that they become footballers or basketballers or whatever, well, I feel like I'm sort of doing the job. And I think in the past, if we go back to junior programs, a lot of the time it was like an afterthought. It's just like, yeah, we better run a junior program and Bob, you're not doing anything, so you can run the program. Whereas I just go, no. I sort of understand the pathway, and my job's to sort of be involved and lead from the front and educate coaches who are working with me and make sure they're doing a good job as well, because our juniors deserve it, and it's all about retention.
You've been a lifelong golfer, Dennis. You're helping to create lifelong golfers. Your passion's to create lifelong golfers. You've done some amazing stuff in the game. I've just looked at the time. It's been absolutely fabulous to do. It's not the last conversation we'll have, but for the moment, we'll let the listeners go. Really appreciate you taking the time, mate. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure, Rod. And it's time for a
we'll have one of those biscuits now that your delightful wife brought us earlier. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks, mate.
I don't know about you, but I found that a very refreshing interview given what's been going on at the top levels of the game in recent weeks and months. Now, for those wondering, the biscuits and cakes mentioned at the start were indeed dealt with appropriately, and Dennis's delightful wife Glenda did in fact make me a sandwich and some treats for my journey back to the airport, for which I am eternally grateful. If you're listening, Glenda, you've set the bar high for my next interviewee. That's all for episode 68, but I don't have a snippet of our next just yet because John Huggin will be doing that interview at the upcoming US Open. Now, I won't reveal the name of the guest, but suffice to say, you don't want to miss it next time on The Thing About Golf.